Yep, that's Doom running on an e-ink smartphone with a gaming controller. And it's not the only game either. Ridiculous? Absolutely. But that's kind of the point. It shows just how capable and surprisingly versatile the Bigme Hibreak Pro really is. With Android 14 and some clever e-ink refresh magic, this phone actually feels like a proper smartphone. One that might finally bridge the gap between eye comfort and uncompromised usability. And if you're wondering why anyone would want an e-ink phone in the first place, think less eye strain, longer battery life, and a generally more distraction-free experience. Well, obviously not if you're running Doom, but even if you don't want to do everything a regular phone can do on the Hibreak Pro, the fact that it can is pretty amazing. Whether you're gaming, watching videos, taking pictures, using Android Auto, reading ebooks, or just making calls, the Bigme Hibreak Pro holds up surprisingly well. With e-ink even in direct sunlight, and thanks to the dual dome Frontlight, also in the dark. So here's the question, is the experience actually good enough to ditch your LCD smartphone? Let's find out. And if you're into e-ink or minimalist phones, consider subscribing. I'll also compare this to the Minimal Phone and Modida Compact. Speaking of comparisons, when I first saw the Hibreak Pro, it immediately reminded me of the books Palmer. From the front, they look incredibly similar, but look a bit closer, you'll notice a few differences, like the earpiece design, the light sensor setup, and slightly thicker bezels fit the Hibreak Pro over, and the differences become a lot more obvious. It has standard buttons instead of those thick rounded ones on the Palmer, and the back cover is just a flat piece of plastic. No texture or anything. One thing I do like a lot is the flush rear camera. Even the regular Hibreak phones didn't have that, and it's just so much nicer when you put the phone down on the desk. No wobbling. Now if you look at the early Hibreak models, yeah, you can probably tell that I broke the black and white one here, dropped something on it, totally my fault, but it goes to show that even compact e-ink devices, which people often assume are a bit more robust, aren't immune to damage. Anyway, what I actually wanted to point out is that the older models are noticeably smaller than the new Pro version. And honestly, I kinda wish Bigme had kept the old form factor. That was one of the best things about the original models in my opinion. Still, the Pro handles well. It's definitely large, about the size of a Galaxy S25 Ultra, but still pocketable. But once you get past the size comparison, the Hibreak Pro quickly reminds you that it's not aiming to be a flagship, at least not in terms of build quality. Because despite the Pro label, the build quality and feel in the hand aren't great. Starting with the frame, it's this glossy piece of plastic that just looks and feels kinda cheap. Maybe it's a bit more resistant to wear than the matte finish on the smaller Hibreaks, but overall I'd call it a downgrade. Same goes for the side buttons. I love that there are now two customizable buttons on the left, but they're just a bit too rattly for my taste. Give the phone a quick shake and they rattle quite a lot actually. At least the power button / fingerprint sensor doesn't have that issue. That one actually feels solid. Unfortunately, the sensor itself is one of the worst I've used in the world. It's not only pretty slow, which I could tolerate, but it's also unreliable, typically needing 2 or more tries to unlock the phone. It gets a bit better over time once you get used to it and put your finger down slowly, but overall it's still a frustrating experience. Luckily, the white back doesn't gather fingerprints or smudges easily, though oddly it's not perfectly centered on the device. There's a more noticeable gap on one side than on the other. It doesn't affect functionality, but it's definitely not pretty. The earpiece speaker and the bottom speaker work together to create a stereo setup, and quality is actually surprisingly good while being sufficiently loud. The SIM card slot, that's also on the bottom, holds up to 2 SIM cards, but unfortunately there's no microSD card expansion for the 256 gigs of internal storage, which is a bit of a missed opportunity, especially considering the non-Pro Hibreaks have that option. And last but not least, there's an IR blaster on the top, which right now doesn't do anything because I couldn't find an app that works with it. In terms of raw performance, the Bigme Hibreak Pro is one of the fastest e-ink devices out there. With its Dimensity 1080 octa-core SoC and 8 gigs of RAM, it scores 956, 2,484 and 2,210 points in single-core, multi-core and GPU performance in Geekbench 6 respectively. That puts it somewhere between a Snapdragon 860 and 778G. Solid mid-range performance, which is easily fast enough for everything the e-ink screen can handle. The phone runs a bit on the warmer side under load, like playing games, which is noticeable in the upper portion on the backside. Besides 5G connectivity, with a pretty wide range of supported bands for good global coverage, It also has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, NFC, GPS, and a compass. With a resolution of 300 ppi, the flush 6.13-inch e-ink display is also on par with the market and offers a sharp and crisp experience. The phone comes with a pre-applied screen protector, which I actually appreciate because even though the screen itself is also matte, it's not very scratch resistant, same as the Book's Palma 2. So carrying the phone in your pocket without the screen protector would most likely result in a few scratches over time. The frontlight to illuminate the screen is pretty even, with just slight halos at the edge of the screen and a very nice soft glow feel to it. The frontlight is color temperature adjustable, and with 120 nits max and roughly 65 nits for just the cold or warm light settings, it's easily bright enough to improve readability in any scenario. You can of course turn off the frontlight completely as well. There's also a light sensor available to automatically adjust the frontlight brightness, but that's way too sensitive and almost instantly adjusts the frontlight in huge steps. So walking from one room to the next can result in this crazy frontlight adjustment. It's honestly insane, and I've never seen any device do it like this. Also, it sets the frontlight to 100% in complete darkness, which is something you obviously don't want to do. The Bigme Hibreak Pro runs Android 14, which of course isn't the latest, but still decent, especially for e-ink. Since Android was never designed to run on the inherently slow e-ink screen, it's important for companies to make a few adaptations to improve the user experience. In case of the Hibreak Pro, I'd say it's a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, Bigme improved the control center significantly compared to the older hybrid models. But on the other hand, the adaptations don't run very deep. Just an example, the control center seems to be a simple overlay and not an overhaul of the default Android UI. So you can pull it down from the top right side of the screen, but you can't push it back up. Another example is the settings UI, which looks good, but it's just part of the default launcher and not an actual update of the original Android settings. So the user experience can be a bit inconsistent because of things like that. But having said that, the user experience is still decent, also thanks to Bigme's proprietary Super Refresh technology. With the e-ink quick settings, you can switch between different e-ink modes and either choose a slow high quality mode or quicker refresh settings that slightly reduce the render quality. With the fastest mode, the screen can refresh up to 21 frames per second, which is actually quite impressive for e-ink. And not just that, Bigme's algorithm also significantly reduces ghosting. So in the fastest mode, after images aren't really a huge deal. And with setting up the customizable buttons, you can refresh the screen with just a click to remove ghosting. There's also an automatic refresh setting that triggers a refresh every couple of taps on the screen, which is also incredibly useful to reduce ghosting with any app. And if there are contrast issues because of the black and white e-ink screen or the faster refresh mode, there are options for that as well. And that e-ink control is also saved per app. So once you change the setting for an app, it will fall back to that mode you chose when you reopen the app. The only thing I'd like to see added is an overview of the stored app settings, like Books is doing it. So all in all, I'd say that is actually one of the most uncompromising Android experiences on e-ink because of these features. But even with this impressive performance, allowing you to run any app and even watch videos, for example, I'd say the Hibreak Pro is still a great tool to combat doom scrolling. No, not the game this time, but especially apps like Instagram or TikTok are simply less enjoyable because of the inherent limitations e-ink undeniably still has. And even scrolling through a mostly text-based platform like Reddit loses part of its charm at least. When it comes to the user interface itself, the default launcher was one of the first things I replaced. With the incredibly cumbersome widget implementation on a separate page and the little options you have, it's pretty bad. I switched to Nova Launcher and set up the phone with a black and white icon pack for a better user experience. Of course, you can use any Android launcher you like. And after removing most of the other Bigme apps as well and replacing them with alternatives, I'm actually pretty happy with the setup. But just like with the minimal phone, I wish the Android optimizations for the e-ink screen run deeper to begin with. Because as I said, Android wasn't meant to run on e-ink, and contrast levels and animations in many apps don't translate well to the e-ink screen. Still, thanks to the great e-ink viewing modes, this is not a bad experience. Installing WhatsApp, Signal, Kindle, or any other app directly from the integrated Google Play Store is super easy. However, a few apps seem to have issues with how Bigme scales Android on the Hibreak Pro. While reading with the Kindle apps works without any issues, the library doesn't scale properly. That's most likely the same issue as with Android Auto, which I'll come to in a moment. Just one thing to keep in mind, even though the phone shows an image when it's in standby, don't mistake it for the e-ink version of an always-on display. Some notifications show up on the standby screen, but others don't, and you need to wake the phone. Also installed a couple of banking apps, and all of them started without any issues. But the Bank of America and VR banking apps had issues right after the splash screen. So I'd say most apps should work without any issues. Accessibility settings are available in the extended settings, which are just the regular Android settings actually, and you can adapt the text size here. But for some reason the scaling slider isn't working. Android Auto was a bit of a mixed bag. After updating the app from the Play Store, installing Google Maps, the Google and Google Assistant apps, it works with the latest software version. But the whole user interface scaling was off when using it wirelessly with my car. Not only was everything way too large on the infotainment of the car, but the phone itself also had issues with scaling contents properly when being connected, like the keyboard or the notification center, for example. From what I've read online, it doesn't seem to be just my car having this issue, so I suspect it's a problem with how the phone's UI is configured. You can work around it by changing the DPI of the Android Auto settings with the e-ink quick settings on the phone, but that also changes the scaling on the phone. And you need to make this adaptation for Google Maps and potentially other apps as well, so hopefully Bigme will fix that issue so this approach isn't needed anymore. And besides the scaling, there were also some weird color saturation issues that sometimes occurred, painting the whole Google Maps in dark blue instead of the usual colors. Maybe that's a result of the high contrast mode. But then again, I didn't have any of those issues with the Minnow phone I recently reviewed. The connection between the car and phone was stable, however, and the GPS location was also incredibly quick and accurate, with just one small exception when the system thought I was in Vienna when I was actually 200 kilometers south. That happened even though the map showed the right spot. It only corrected itself after driving a bit. So all in all, Android Auto works, but there's a lot room for improvement. Hopefully Bigme tackles those issues with future updates. I'd say the biggest surprise for me was the camera performance. The main 20 megapixels camera takes really solid photos. Not great, but absolutely usable. There's definitely quite a bit of noise, but they're sharp with good dynamic range. These are probably the best photos I've seen from any e-ink device so far. However, the same can't be said for the front-facing camera, which is pretty bad. But that might also have something to do with the fact that I scratched the lens by mistake, which was way too easy to do in my opinion. But nonetheless, performance isn't great, so this might be good enough for video calls, but not for taking selfies. Besides the camera, another welcome surprise was battery performance, which was really good as well. Using Android Auto with the phone awake resulted in a drain of roughly 20% per hour. Doing something less demanding and drain goes down significantly, allowing you to use the Kindle app, for example, for many hours. Standby drain was also very good. So if you're not using the phone actively, you can expect runtimes of a week or more. The only thing I wish Bigme also added was wireless charging. The Modida Compact and Minimal phone both come with wireless charging, which would have improved comfort on the Hibreak Pro as well. The phone has 18 watts wired charging, which is nice though. However, the Hibreak Pro does get warm when charging as a result. And that brings us to the conclusion. And I have to say that all in all, I was pleasantly surprised at how much better I like the Hibreak Pro compared to the previous models. Its hardware capabilities are more fleshed out, and the software also feels much better overall. It's not perfect, but it's the closest we've come to a truly capable e-ink phone, and that's exciting. But software is still the Achilles heel of the Hibreak Pro, same as it's the case with every Bigme device I've used so far. They have a lot of features and the basics are there, but the user interface just lacks polish. And the fact that I had a couple of random reboots every couple of days was also a small annoyance. But I'd argue that the Bigme Hibreak Pro is still the most uncompromising e-ink smartphone you can get right now. It has good global coverage, incredibly good e-ink viewing modes for using Android apps as best as it's technically possible on e-ink. GPS is quick and accurate. Google Play makes expanding its functionality easy, and root access was also already established with the possibility of custom ROMs on the horizon. So if anything, I'd say the Hibreak Pro will only get better from here on out. Be it Bigme, who refines the phone over time, or the community that provides the needed improvements. But as always, don't buy anything on hopes and promises, but only for what it is right now. If you have been eagerly awaiting a powerful e-ink phone, that allows for optimizations the way you like them, the Hibreak Pro is certainly worth a closer look. If you found this video helpful, a like would be appreciated, and also consider subscribing to not miss future comparisons to other e-ink phones like the Motila Compact or Minimal phone. Thanks for your time watching, and I'll see you on the next one.